We go out to Glen Suitor, who was at Touchdown Pacific, Glenn, and it looked like a great atmosphere out there. I know there was some transmission issues and internet issues, but that doesn't stop everybody around the CFL from talking about the halftime interview that occurred. It was a short one with Nathan Rourke. What is your take on that, Mr. Suitor?
Well, it's twofold because on the one hand, I get it. I understand. It's Nathan Rourke who had, was 0-2 after, returning to the Lions, lost that first game and wasn't real good. And then the second game there was improvement, but again, lost another one. And this was a trip back home for him. I mean, this was back where he was born and he had family in the stands. And so when you add that all up, it was a very, very important game. And you could tell at halftime that it was all business for him. In fact, I mentioned that on the air, that it was a business trip. Everyone else was having fun at Touchdown Pacific, but for Nathan Rourke, this was a business trip. He's got to get his game back. And he did get his game back, especially that first half. He was on fire in the first half. So I get the reason, but, he is going to have to understand that, and believe me, Nathan and I will talk before it's over many times, that this is not going to be optional. This is going to be, you could ask Darian this as well. Like when you're the quarterback of a team in Saskatchewan, when you're a Canadian quarterback in Vancouver, and you're becoming the face of the franchise over the next maybe 2 or 3 years, you're going to have to do all those interviews. It's not really optional. And sometimes it'll be at halftime. So, I think what can happen here is if he's uncomfortable with them, we as a network can work together to try and make sure he's comfortable. We can work with him. We can talk to him about, the types of questions he likes, although we have to be able to ask some tough ones at times. But at the end of the day, if we can work with him to make it, to increase his comfort level with it, then, we're going to do it, because at the end of the day, we're going to do it. We're going to ask. And as one of the faces of not only the franchise over the next few years, but possibly the league, you're going to have to do those interviews. Darian knows, Wes knows, especially with the new TV contract, saying no is really not an option. And I know he kind of doubled down on it after the game in the media. I didn't hear it exactly, but I heard through Farhan that he had said that he's been promised to do it again or something. And, I didn't hear that directly, so I'm not quoting him there. But if there was anything like that, there'll be discussions coming up this week that, make it clear that he's got to do those things. And he's got to figure out a way, if it's uncomfortable, to become comfortable. We can help him with that, but it's really not a negotiation. It just isn't.
Exactly what he said after the game, Glenn. We have it quoted in our article on 3downnation.com. Quote, "I did it for Coach Campbell, and he said that I wouldn't have to do one for the rest of my career. I want to hold him to that." Close quote. What's your reaction when you hear that?
Yeah, that's a relatively new player, and I even include the 22 season, but a new player to the league. I'm not sure what was said between Coach Campbell and Nathan, and to what extent he made that guarantee, but it's just not going to happen. I'm just, I can tell you that our network is going to discuss with ownership, the president, and I'm sure Rick Campbell as well, to discuss what is going to have to be, non-negotiable, that the face of the franchise is going to have to do some interviews. And he's going to have to be out there and discuss the game and to talk about, good and bad sometimes. So, again, I think there's a lot of room for us to work together so that he finds a comfort level with it. But it's going to, over the next week or so, there's going to be all kinds of discussions about how that, if that guarantee was given by Coach Campbell, it's not correct. Let's put it that way. It's because it's going to happen.
Glen Suitor on the line with us on Countdown to Kickoff. His segment brought to you by North Home Windows, designing, building, and installing window systems in Saskatchewan for Saskatchewan conditions. Google North Home Windows. For the uninitiated or the people that did not hear the very brief halftime interview with TSN's Farhan Lalji, Rourke said, quote, "We're up 31-6. That's all they really care about. Thanks, Farhan," patted him on the shoulder and ran off to the locker room. And I agree with you, Glenn. There's going to be lots of talk about this, and we've seen it, the traffic on 3downnation.com on the story, the comments on social media about it are coming from all different sides on this. So this is a story that is going to continue to be talked about. From an overall perspective, though, the game, the atmosphere, Touchdown Pacific, how did you feel this went for the league?
Well, it was a huge success. It really was. I mean, and I should mention just before we leave Nathan Rourke, what a great game. And I think he is finding his game, and I think he's close to getting it all the way back. So that, for the on-field stuff, he looks like the Nathan Rourke we remember. But, yeah, no, it was a huge success. It's so successful, I think, that I think the theme of these games now is not necessarily to play these games in a site away from a CFL city, but it's play these to find a possible expansion city. It's not that anymore. I think it's more of its own franchise now. Let's take the brand, let's take the game to the audience and take them to people that might not have ever gone to BC Place or to Mosaic Stadium. And let's take it to a different city. Make sure the field is right for the players' safety. But if it's half the attendance, that they'll think that it's worth it to bring the product and the brand to new people. And I from my understanding, and none of this is official, there are all kinds of cities that are real keen on doing this. A couple in Ontario, Quebec. We've talked about Laval many times. Possibly the interior of BC. There's lots of the different places that, you could do it with 15 or 16,000. These temporary stands are excellent. The facility, the field was in great shape. And this was a huge success. It brought $25 to $30 million of economic impact to the city of Victoria. Now, what city wouldn't want to get involved with that?
Yeah, Glenn, you kind of answered my question, but I was just thinking, okay, I always liked the idea of Touchdown Atlantic to maybe foster getting a team out there, but now we're in the Pacific, so what are we going to do? Touchdown Prairies? Can we get a game in Saskatoon? What's a good idea? What's not? What do you think?
Well, I think they're all good ideas. Honestly, I think this is going to become sort of a franchise. It's going to become this idea that, it's not going to be, do we do one this year from the league's office? It's going to be, which one do we do, or do we possibly do two in a year? Right. And again, this is not specific quotes from league officials, but it's just the buzz I got being around the people that were involved, Amar Doman being one of them, the owner of the Lions, that this franchise is a huge success. And the spin-offs and, the BC ferries going across to Vancouver Island were full of orange jerseys and orange T-shirts. I mean, the entire ferry. The ferries were full with these fans. So, this is something that you mentioned Saskatoon. I never heard that name in any of these discussions. And again, these aren't meetings. These are just me listening to other people talking. But it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. There's a great stadium up there at the U of S. I'm sure they can add on to it. Why wouldn't you want to try to do one like that? I think it would be fantastic. Saskatoon would love it.
1 minute left with you. I want to get a chance for you to touch on the Labor Day Classic. So go where you want, but you got about 60 seconds.
Okay. What I think? You got to go strength against strength. This Winnipeg team is going one direction. The Riders are going in a different one. So one of the strengths, like a small example of that is, if Willie Jefferson is coming off the edge, go after him with the run game. Take Wes Cates or, Frankie Hickson or whomever they got it. And you know what I mean? And run it right at Willie. So he's not going to disrupt in the passing game because he's worried about the run on every single play. Run right at him and make him a tackler, not a pass rusher.
All right, Glenn, enjoy the game, man. Wish you were here, but we'll have to go without you.
Thanks, buddy.